Cool. Okay, welcome guys. We're really excited to be here. Thanks for having us. My name's Simon, this is Arrie. We're from, ironically there's actually no reference to Harry Potter in our talk at all. It's just the title. It's not something we really followed. But cool, yeah, let's get started. We're from Platform 45. Platform 45 is a custom software development company. The best way to describe us is we build products, custom products. We try build the right thing, and at the same time we try build that thing right, on the tech side. Okay, so we try hit both. I don't know if you guys recognize that logo. That's Root Bank. They're a programmable bank currently in private beta in South Africa. Literally, you can code your bank account. Friggin' coolest thing ever. And we've had the privilege to get access to this API, and that's the demo at the end. Cool, so why doth ye such a fantastic beast? Or should I say, why are we interested in chatbots? So, chatbots and AI in general are just gravely misunderstood, right? I actually asked one of my friends, I explained to her what I was studying a while back, and I was like, yeah, I'm thinking about doing this research project in artificial life, and she's like aliens. Like, no, not aliens. It's a simulation, But I mean, chatbots, more than any AI is misunderstood because it goes into area that we previously reserved for human beings, right? That's conversation, whether it's text or voice-based. Chatbots can seem a bit like a magic show, and AI in general. So something you don't really understand seems like magic. And you go to a magic show, and you might think like, wow, this is pretty incredible. But actually, it's just because you don't understand the trick, right? So we're here to show you that chatbots are not magical, that they're just kind of some clever machine learning stuff happening and some rule-based things, and we'll maybe at the end we can even show you how Dialogflow works. But yeah, chatbots are real and alive today. They're not just like a toy, they're really being used, and they're taking over things like support, even scheduling. I don't know if you know X.AI is really, really cool, and a bunch of other stuff, right? So this is not a toy, this is like for real. And let's look at these things.
Cool. So as Simon mentioned, we like to, at Platform 45, kind of build products that are valuable to our users. And I think many of us in the room, if you don't build something valuable, then actually what's the point of you doing it? And we tend to solve usability problems along with just building something that's valuable, but building something that people find easy to interact with and just communicate with your systems and vice versa. So we've really come far, and we believe we've crossed chasms with like design thinking and product approaches and all of these new ways of engaging with our users. But the natural progression to all of this in our minds has been basically natural language processing, because it's so intuitive. Because talking to your application and asking it to set a reminder or book a movie for you or whatever else you can think of is so much more easier and intuitive than navigating through menus and screens and clicking on stuff that's just annoying all the time. Another cool thing is that when you kind of implement these interfaces in various devices, it's like just a conversation that you really worry about. There's not more than that in terms of like the interface and this button's too small on this screen or whatever. It's just that discussion that you're having with your user, and that's effectively what it is. So one of the reasons we also find this very exciting is because users can actually talk to your system, we find that they can actually tell you exactly what it is that they want to do. They can ask a very specific question, which in a UI, they're limited by like the buttons they can click on. And that's cool for like gathering more insight into what they want to do. So yeah, we find that NLP is just a foundational part of AI, and we kind of see it as a final step or bridge between like man and machine.
Cool, yeah, so like Arrie mentioned, conversation is this really intuitive interface, and we're now coming to how can we use this interface and integrate it with our products. And because it's such an intuitive interface, you can't expect it to be perfect yet, right? So I've got a story. My wife hates Siri, okay? And the reason she hates Siri is because she wasn't keen on using it in the first place. It's like, if you think of it, it's kind of weird. But I encouraged her. I said, like, kind of just try it out. And so she was driving the one day, and she said, hey Siri, phone Stacy Smith. And Siri responded with, Googling a plate of chips. You know, so like, and she obviously, like, she got really frustrated, and I was just like, just try it again. And then it says, Googling a plate of chips. You know, so, and now every time I say, oh, you can ask Siri to set an alarm or whatever, she'll be like, no, and she'll mention the chips, and it never goes down well. No, but it's important to realize that if one believes something is actually intelligent, you know, remember I talk about if you don't understand it, it seems magical, and then you realize that it's actually not. It gets something wrong. You get this feeling in the pit of your stomach akin to like kind of reaching the top of a stairs, and you step on that imaginary step. It's like quite betraying. And in AI, they call this the uncanny valley. So when you think something is something that it's actually not, it reveals itself as being, oh wow, it's actually just ones and zeros. And that happens a lot, right? But like I said, AI or chatbots are actually used today, right? And there are a lot of basic functions that it does get right. So for example, like Arrie, like I'm still old school, I'm still like using reminders and stuff. But Arrie uses Google Assistant, and he uses like reminders. The coolest one now, because you go to Google Home, is he's like play Stranger Things on Netflix, and like it's faster than you can even open a web page. Like it's incredible, you know. So these things, some of these things are already possible, and like actually work. You know, not like what I just described, like Googling a plate of chips or whatever. Cool. So remember how I said chatbots are misunderstood, right? If there's one thing I want you to take away from this talk is that you don't need to know a thing about AI to build a chatbot, right? So AI is becoming more and more accessible to developers, especially through big companies who provide services like Google's Dialogflow, which is what we're talking about today, Google Meetup, Amazon Alexa Skills, they suck. You know, so you don't need to know anything about machine learning or natural language processing to understand the stuff. You just need to know 3 concepts, which we'll introduce today. Okay. So what saith thee regarding chatbots, Arrie? So we're just going to look under the hood a bit, because remember I said you can be ignorant, but you should have a high-level kind of understanding of how these things work.
So Simon's very right in saying that they can seem complex, but also when you kind of peel back the mystery and the magic of it, it actually becomes very simple to understand and work with, and then rationalize how to actually apply it in what you're building. So basically, to make it a bit simpler, the first thing that we kind of need you to understand just is that it's an algebraic function mapping input space to an output space. It literally just takes in the text that the user gives you, and it extracts 3 components basically out of it that gives you the information you need to know what exactly the user wants to do, and then you can respond in a very meaningful way to them. So continuing on how important NLP is, it's kind of one of those foundational pieces of machine learning. And everyone always talks about like the Turing test and stuff, but if we really aim to have a machine one day fool us, you know, as like it's fully human, it has to actually be able to converse with us as well, like understand us, and we should look at it not only its intelligence and what it can execute, but also in kind of communicate for it to kind of pass that test in the end.
Cool, so what we're going to do now, we're just going to walk through a little diagram. It's like a really crappy systems diagram, if you want to be like technical. And we're just going to show the different components and how they talk to each other, right? So basically what chatbots are is like a really special combination of a bunch of tech working together, right? So this is Anna. Anna might say something or type something in a text box. Hello, my name is Anna. That goes directly to the chatbot, right? What happens then is the chatbot you've set up a conversation inside the chatbot, and it is a rules-based and machine learning-based system. So it uses both. It's a hybrid. So it's got some discrete logic, that's the rules, and it's got some stochastic mappings, and that's the machine learning that learns, right? And it does that by you giving it examples of what the user might say, okay? It then gives your app that little structured payload. The three things we'll discuss: the intent, entities, which is basically data, and context. And context can also be thought of like a group of entities. That is then optionally, doesn't have to be, is given to your app, okay? And that little app logic can be sitting anywhere. Ours sits on Google Cloud Functions, don't need a server, really, really cool. But that can be anything, can be API endpoints or whatever. What then happens is you either the bot responds with the response that you've set up, or you can have your app actually respond. So like say they want to register or something, they've just provided you your details. You might say, cool, congratulations, thanks for registering Stephen. And that would go back to the user. If they're operating through a voice interface, okay, so we're talking about text, there's just an additional conversion step. So Anna might type the text, that will go to Chatbot. If Anna speaks like audio waves, that goes through machine learning again, and that's called, don't know, audio wave processing. I'm not an engineer, I'm so ignorant about the real world. And that becomes text. So the Chatbot's interface is text, but you can obviously do that additional step to have a voice interface. And then obviously the same in reverse. So the chatbot always responds with text. You can then do some speech synthesis where it actually synthesizes the audio waves for you to try to understand like the text by hearing it, right? Or it appears on the screen as text. Cool, so how are we actually going to implement these bots? So we're going to discuss those three important concepts, and then we're going to look at two examples. We're going to look at how to register a user on a site, something everybody needs to do. Maybe a bit of a silly example, but applicable. And then we'll look at the root bot demo, which is like, it's a voice demo that uses Google Home.
Cool. So the very first kind of concept to understand here is the intent. So just very practically, this is understanding what your user wants to do, or what does that piece of text mean. So usually when you start building these things, it really helps when you ask those types of questions. It's like, what do you mean, or what do you want to do, or those kinds of things that kind of guide you down that path. And from that, you can kind of build out the rest of your flow and application. And the first step for the chatbot is obviously learning this functional mapping between the text and then that intent of the user. And just the reason why unmasking intent is such a difficult thing to do is if you actually just think about language, how ambiguous and complex it is, and the way that we speak to each other can sometimes be just very difficult to even understand each other's intents and what we mean, and we get confused. So, you know, for machines that are only starting out with this now, it's like really complex. But yeah, neural networks and machine learning is just kind of progressed to the point where it's starting to handle these things really well. So just a quick example that I want to throw in here is, if you actually think about when you write code, right? When you write an application, you don't do it in English because of that ambiguity. Instead, you give it like very specific, unambiguous code to execute. You know, it knows exactly what to do. So deriving the correct intent is a very important thing. And it allows the user to speak as intuitively as possible. It's a discussion that Simon and I had the other day, and where we actually, if you take the top one there, you know, we don't really talk to each other by asking, what's the weather forecast for tomorrow? You know, you actually just ask, do you think I should wear a jacket tomorrow when I go to Pretoria or wherever you want to go, right? And that is the kind of intuitive conversation that we really want to move towards.
Cool, so the second most important thing is entity, right? So I said entity is kind of like data, and this one is quite simple. So in this example, my favorite color is yellow. You train you don't want to say train because like that's what Google Dialogflow does.
Yeah.
You give it examples, right, and it does the training. So you give it examples. These are colors. You highlight the color and you say this thing here, this is a color, right, and it'll learn that those things are colors. But in this example, you're giving it the text. My favorite color is yellow, and it's extracting the entity of color yellow, right? So it has a type and a value. Entities can also be composite, like this here. So this is a little more complicated. If I say you owe me 100 Rand, it can pass that 100 Rand into a currency entity, and that's got a unit and an amount. And it can actually get pretty nested. It's pretty insane. But that's really all there is to entities. Context is really the most important, and this is how Google Dialogflow sets up the rules. So for example, if I say to Arrie, will it be cold tomorrow, and tomorrow we're in a different country, that context is really important, right? And it determines what the bot responds with. So in this example, this cheeseburger is delicious, and Arrie will say, damn right it is. You know, he doesn't have to say, damn right this cheeseburger is delicious as well. You know, we know we're talking about the cheeseburger. It seems obvious to us, but for a machine that's very explicit about what is what. You need to be unambiguous, very discreet, that kind of thing. Cool. So now we're going to do a little registration demo. Really hope it works. This app that we're building is our app for at work. It's called WealthBit. It's basically like a robo-advisor tool. You give it all your information and it tells you how much you should be saving for retirement. So here, this is a little registration flow. So Arrie's going to say, I'd like to register. Can you guys see this text? Big enough? Okay. Cool, so we need your email. Please enter it. Now we've picked up the intent registration. Okay, and we're going down a conversation path. We've provided an email, so now ask for a password. And these are required entities, right? So it's filling the gaps. It's called slot filling. Cool. So you can see that it's hit our app. We've looked up in the database. You're a new user. Now our intent is to register with more details. It's also responded there with Dave, which is pretty cool. That's using an entity and a response. This is actually quite a simple example. We're just punching in the data, but you can respond with my ID number is this, or blah blah is my ID number. Kind of it extracts the ID number out of the natural language. Cool. So that's basically the chatbot bit of it. It's now sent you to kind of two-factor auth, and you'll go on into the app. Cool. Yeah, that's intent, entity, and context. Okay. Cool. So Arrie's just going to plug in the Google Home. So the tech we use for this demo is Google Assistant is the interface, right? So you must actually think about your chatbot and the interface as being separate. So you can build a chatbot in Google Dialogflow, and then you can actually, you know how they always say like turn it on? Like you can literally turn it on. You turn on like Viber, you turn on Slack, you turn on Google Assistant, and that is the chat interface that interacts with Dialogflow, and Dialogflow talks to your app. So it's quite cool how they've abstracted it from kind of the UI. No. Who of you guys have played with the Google Home before?
Okay, if you haven't, get one. Okay, if you haven't, get one.
Okay, there we go. Have you logged into root? Okay. We're ready. We're ready.
Let's hope this one works. Okay. Okay, Google. Talk to root bank. Okay, Google. Talk to root bank.
All right, getting the test version of root bank. All right,
Hello from root.
What would you like to do?
What's
Hello
my
from
account
root.
balance?
What would you like to do?
What's my account balance?
Your current balance is 714.81
Your current
rand.
balance is
I'd like to make a
714.81
payment.
rand.
I'd like to make
Who
a
would you
payment.
like to pay?
Simon.
Who would you like to pay?
How
Simon.
much would you like to transfer?
50
How much would you
rand.
like to transfer?
50
Got it,
rand.
you're sending Simon 50 rand. Is this
Got it,
correct?
you're sending Simon 50
Yes, that's
rand.
right.
Is this correct?
Yes, that's right.
Great, transferred 50 rand to Simon successfully.
Great, transferred 50
Oh,
rand
yeah.
to
Balance
Simon
now.
successfully.
What's my balance now?
Your current balance is
Your
664.81
current
rand.
balance is
And what was my last
664.81 rand.
And what was my last transaction?
Your last transaction was for 50 rand with description
Your
F.
last transaction was for 50
Yeah, that's
rand.
that's EFT. we just hard coded the description. Right, but that was all live, right? We can show you on our root accounts. We can show you it's actually paid me $50, and we actually do this quite often because we order coffee online, and if I order, then Arrie has to pay me. Yeah, that's all it does now. We wanted to be a completely natural interface to your bank accounts. Have you guys seen the movie Her? How that's so intuitive, talking to the computer. Yeah, that's what we wanted to do. Cool. Yeah, that's it. Thanks, guys. Cool.
Yeah, so we can take some questions.
If there are any questions. The price, depending where you buy it and how you buy it. The price, depending where you buy it and how you buy it.
I was going to ask where you buy
Oh, do you?
Price from me, so I think it's probably better than you can tell me if you got it.
Yeah, it's basically that price. So it might have been from you.
But seriously, where did we get it from?
It was from, so we got it from,
It's like the Zeke online.
You guys are Zeke online.
So obviously, I
Yeah.
think privacy becomes obviously interesting
Yeah.
because obviously it's always going to be listening. We need to kind of activate it.
That's an interesting one. Quite cool. We just leverage Google Assistant, and Google Assistant understands who you are. Right? So you can say, when you set up your bot, you can say, allow them to query these functions without being signed in. So those are normally things like, what can I do with root bank? Like help kind of things. And then obviously you need to be signed in and identified as the user to pay someone or something like that.
Okay, so what I actually want to know is do you guys
So, kind of to answer that, in terms of the registration flow thing, if you do use something like Dialog Flow, there is a history of everything that kind of the user entered. So you kind of do have that data. But from kind of how we've applied some of those things, it's more been to parts of the apps that aren't that sensitive, like registration. We've been kind of playing around with Google Assistant thing, obviously. There's still some privacy concerns around, obviously, your bank account not knowing core or not. So yeah, it's still something that needs to be considered.
But I think in Google Dialogflow specifically, you can say this entity is sensitive or protected or whatever, and then it'll mask it in all the logs. But yeah, we've been in POC mode. We've been just getting it working. Then make it fast and secure and.
Sure.
Did my hand go up before you finished answering?
No.
Sorry. Did my hand go up before you finished answering?
The liability,
Sorry.
in terms of the liability, for example, taking control of the liability, for example, the signal processing is happening inside there. I mean, if my voice is quite similar to yours and then I start playing myself,
Yeah,
if
so-
it fails, extend liability.
Right.
If it fails, I'm not saying it does fail, so actually my follow-on question have which voice sort of structured way to test of which voices and how wide a range
Yeah, so
of voices it will
For
identify.
kind of to
you,
answer
or
that,
Yeah, so-
how good is it?
For kind of to
it's
answer
very,
that,
very interesting, right? So when
it's very,
originally
very
when the Google
interesting,
Phone came
right?
out,
So
it was like
when
one account,
originally when
accounts
the Google Phone
that
came
signed
out,
in,
it was
that
like
is
one
the
account
that gets
accounts
used.
that
Now you can
signed
add
in
up
that
to like
is
6 accounts on it
gets used.
and do
Now you
voice
can add
matching
like 6 accounts on it
to it.
and do
I found it
voice
to be
matching,
pretty accurate, but I haven't
to
found
it.
anyone
I found it
with
to be
a
pretty
similar
accurate,
enough
but I
voice
haven't
to
found
official metrics
anyone
to
with
define
a similar enough voice.
The
not
official
well.
metrics to define that level of how
from this being kind of our interface.
From
bot,
I mean
right?
from
It's
this
like,
being kind of our interface.
there's a lot of
bot, right?
in
It's
kind
like
of creating this game.
there's a lot of
trust
in kind of creating this game. There's a lot of trust
thing promised was to make
Google's
sure that
thing promised was
that
to
kind of
make
the,
sure that
person
that kind of
speaking
the,
matches to the right account. But
person
as far as the
speaking
liability
matches to the
of
right
that,
account.
I'm not
But
actually
as far as the
sure.
liability of that, I'm not
indemnify themselves against it when they like initially start using it for an application, but just don't say like we
They
think
probably
it's
do,
really
but I haven't
good, but if something goes
T's
wrong,
and C's.
T's and C's, guys. T's and C's.
By clicking, by entering this room, we.
By entering this room, we
Just want to ask about your app.
Yeah.
With the form of
Yeah.
So, say you intervenate and somebody says, no, I don't want to intervenate. Are they not called the no? Is that handled
On Dialogflow. So you would have to set up, it's actually called a follow-up intent. It's quite a common thing. So you would say, I want to register, and then you're like, oh, I don't want to register. How do I get out of this thing? Like you might say something like cancel, and that's where contexts come into play, right? So if you're in a flow, you're trying to fulfill an intent, and the user says something negative maybe, you then do like are you sure? Yes or no? And you might go back to like a previous context, or they say you clear the context. So it's like, let's recheck what the user's intent is. But you set that up in Dialogflow.
one follow-up is,
But you set that up in Dialogflow.
and one follow-up is, what's the word embeddings are?
What?
Word embedding trigger. It doesn't use.
What?
Word embeddings. It doesn't use, or
I'm not sure I understand. Like what text does it train on?
Yeah, the actual word embeddings.
Like what text is it?
Oh, I'm not sure. I do know it supports multiple languages.
I'm not sure.
So I think they have several. Yeah.
I think that's several.
You had a question as well. Yeah.
I think one more question. Yeah.
So maybe a way to answer that is you can actually trigger intent programmatically. So you might build that into your app, like a location trigger or something. And your app can trigger something in Dialogflow, an intent on Dialogflow. Instead of you saying the text first and it extracting the intent, you can actually say from outside, this is the intent, like continue. But I don't know really about like it actually then talking to you and stuff. Cool. Yeah. Cool, thanks guys. When you run out. Cool, man. Enjoyed it.
I run the AWS user group. I did a talk on Alexa.
On Alexa.
So when you say make Alexa.
You should try Dialogflow. It's really sick. Are you going to use this thing?
guess so.
I think they want you
I don't
to
think that's
record
an
your voice.
option.
This is probably actually still recording.
Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you.
Cool.